welcome to another First Five. Today we find ourselves in Mark chapter 9. And there's this story about Jesus, as it is one of the Gospels, and this story has a couple interactions with other people that I think are really important to how we live our lives among one another. So I'm going to read this whole story beginning in Mark chapter 9, verse 14. It says this: "When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. 'What are you arguing with them about?' he asked. A man in the crowd answered, 'Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not.' 'O unbelieving generation,' Jesus replied, 'how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me.' So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, 'How long has he been like this?' 'From childhood,' he answered. It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us.' 'If you can,' said Jesus, 'everything is possible for him who believes.' Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, 'I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief.' When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. 'You deaf and mute spirit,' he said, 'I command you, come out of him and never enter him again.' The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, 'He's dead.' But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, 'Why couldn't we drive it out?' He replied, 'This kind can come out only by prayer.' They left that place and passed through Galilee. Then Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were, because he was teaching his disciples. He said to them, 'The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise.' But they did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it." There's a lot here, and a lot of this can be confusing to us. The first thing I want to talk about is that I find it interesting that as this boy is possessed by a spirit, what Jesus finds is people arguing. And we don't know exactly what they might have been arguing about, except that it was related to the healing of the spirit. And we know from later in the passage that the disciples couldn't save him either. So instead, what we get is arguing. And I think this is a lesson that often we get wrong as well. And what happens is when things don't go the way we plan, we start to look at each other to blame, and that is what brings argument. And I don't love this about the way that we operate, because what happens when Jesus comes, he essentially comes, asks what they're arguing about, hears about the situation, and then looks to his disciples and kind of rebukes them and says, "Come on, you guys are better than this. I'm not going to be with you forever. I need you guys to learn this lesson." And what I find even more important is that once he sees the situation, he starts to ask the Father and getting to know him and saying, "How long has this been happening? What do we do?" He genuinely cares about the people rather than allowing the argument to take place. I also like that later, the disciples, they come to Jesus and they say, "Why couldn't we do this? Why couldn't we cast out the spirit?" And he said, "This kind can only come out by prayer." Essentially, he's saying, this one can only come out if you ask the Father to do it. Which would have been exactly why Jesus was frustrated that they were arguing in the first place. Because instead of looking to God to solve the problem at hand, they were looking to each other to see which was the hindering person. "Must be your fault. This is your doing, whatever." And they begin to argue about whether something is possible or something should be done. And instead, what they should have done, what Jesus tells them later, is just pray. Prayer is the answer. So, as you walk throughout life, be very careful as you walk with other Christians. Don't get caught up in the argument and the details, but instead, always focus back on God, because the answer comes in prayer and comes in being one with God. Jesus knew this, and he wants us to know this as well, as we consider ourselves followers of Christ. I hope this was helpful for you, and we'll see you later for another First Five.